He is recognized as the greatest athlete of modern times. In the boxing ring, he was nothing short of superb, punishing his opponents at will. Yet it was outside of the ring that he would have his greatest battles and show the world what it really meant to be a man. In this episode of Biographics, we discover what it was that made Muhammad Ali the absolute greatest. It's just a job. Grass grows, birds fly, waves pound the sand. I beat people up. Cassius Marcellus Clay was born on January 17, 1942 in Louisville, Kentucky. His father, Cassius Sr., was a sign painter, while his mother, Odessa, worked as a maid for a wealthy white family in Louisville. A precocious but polite child, young Cassius was raised as a God-fearing Baptist along with his younger brother Rudy. In his younger years, he gave no indication to his athletic future. He steered clear of sports, preferring to play marbles with Rudy or read comic books on his bed. In 1954, when he was 12 years old, Cassius and a friend rode their bicycles to the Columbia Auditorium, which was hosting the Louisville Home Show. They spent the afternoon checking out the wares of various African-American merchants and gorging themselves on the free popcorn and candy that was on offer. When they emerged from the exhibition, the boys were dismayed to discover that Cassius's brand new red and white Schwinn bike was missing. The bike, well, it had been stolen. Cassius was absolutely livid with rage. Crying and upset, he began asking people if they'd seen who took his bike. A woman suggested that he report the theft to Officer Joe Martin, who operated a boxing gym in a nearby basement. Finding Martin, Cassius explained what had happened, adding that he was going to whop whoever had taken his bike. Martin, who had been teaching boxing for decades, asked if the boy knew how to fight. When Cassius admitted that he didn't, the officer suggested that maybe he better learn. And, well, this was the beginning of a long friendship and a glorious career. Cassius, he threw himself into boxing training with a passion and commitment that impressed Martin. Although he had very little natural skill, he had more heart than anyone else in the gym. He'd race to the gym as soon as school let out and would train even on Saturdays. Martin had simply never seen a kid work quite so hard. Outside of the gym, Cassius stayed away from anything that would interfere with his training. He was displaying the kind of determination and discipline that was lacking in many of the older boxers that Martin coached. Martin, he introduced Cassius to a local boxing trainer named Fred Stoner, who helped teach him the fundamentals of the sport. Under the guidance of these two men, young Clay began winning one amateur bout after another. Month after month, year after year, a handful of amateur wins built up a formidable record. By the age of 18, he had won 108 bouts, 6 Kentucky Golden Glove championships, and 2 national AAU titles. In the ring, Cassius was absolutely fearless. He carried self-confidence and a belief in his ability that put his opponents off guard before the first round bell had even sounded. But this was in great contrast to his personal life, because there he really struggled. He was a poor student, with teachers unable to understand why he couldn't transfer the dedication he put into his sport into his studies. No one realized at the time that his struggles in school, they were due to the reading disability dyslexia. In February of 1957, professional boxer Willie Pastrano visited Louisville with his trainer Angelo Dundee. Cassius found out where he was staying and phoned Pastrano's hotel room. The phone was picked up by Dundee. Cassius blurted out that he was going to be the world's greatest boxer and that he wanted to meet Pastrano. With nothing on their schedule that afternoon, Dundee and Pastrano actually invited Cassius to their hotel room. For the next several hours, Cassius peppered Pastrano with questions, only pausing long enough to predict his own future greatness. The bemused Angelo Dundee was impressed with the boy and kept in touch with him. He sometimes sent Cassius and his family free tickets when one of his boxers had a fight lined up in Louisville. In March 1959, Cassius was training in a gym in Chicago, Illinois, prior to an AAU title bout. He overheard some other boxers talking about a group called the Nation of Islam, who were espousing black pride. Back home in Louisville, he decided to learn more about the group by doing a school assignment about them. However, his teacher shut the idea down, telling him that the group was dangerous and that they preached hatred against all white people. Clay, however, was still intrigued by the Nation of Islam. He got a hold of a copy of a newspaper newspaper that they put out and started reading as much as he could about them. At the same time, he was wrestling with the weighty decision about what direction to take his boxing future. People had been talking him up as a hot prospect for the 1960 Olympics in Rome, but at that time, only amateurs were able to compete in the Olympics, so he had to decide if he was going to turn professional or compete in Rome as part of the United States' boxing team. It was at this point that he turned to his friend Angelo Dundee for advice. Dundee told Cassius that he could earn more money as a pro if he was an Olympic champion first. As a result, he decided to stay in his amateur career and compete in the Olympics. By the time the American Olympic team was set to depart for Italy, Clay was in peak physical condition and mentally primed for victory. But there was one slight problem. He was absolutely terrified at the prospect of flying on a plane. In fact, he was so terrified that he almost passed up the opportunity to represent his country. He only finally relented when his old mentor, Joe Martin, convinced him to fly with a parachute on his back. Fortunately, Cassius didn't need to operate his parachute and the plane touched down in Rome without any incident. He started his Olympic campaign with a quick 2-round win over Belgium's Yvonne Bacchus. That win was followed by another win over the Soviet Union's Gennady Shatkov. He was the previous gold medal winner at the 1956 Olympics. Cassius then triumphed in the semi-finals, defeating Australia's Anthony Madigan. The only person standing between Clay and Olympic glory was Poland's Zbigniew Peterzakowski. In contrast to Cassius, who had only been boxing for 6 years, this man was a 3-time European champ and even had won bronze in the 1956 Olympics. However, it was Clay who played the more aggressive game, throwing an avalanche of punches to take the first round lead. The Polish champ, well, he was simply unable to recover, and at the end of 3 rounds, Cassius claimed the Olympic light heavyweight gold medal. Cassius, he returned to Louisville a local hero, with even the mayor turning out to receive him. He was so proud of his victory that he wore his gold medal everywhere. About a week after his return, he and a friend ducked into a restaurant to get out of the rain, but when they tried to order a couple of cheeseburgers and milkshakes, they were told that the restaurant did not serve black people, and they were thrown out. Cassius Clay was an Olympic champion, yet he was still a second-class citizen in his hometown. Standing on the 2nd Street Bridge, he grabbed his gold medal, ripped it from his neck, and threw it into the Ohio River. Despite his frustration with the social climate, Cassius was facing a bright boxing future. Turning professional, he was sponsored by a group of local white businessmen who agreed to sponsor him. They offered to pay him $10,000 up front and to cover all of his training expenses. In return, they would take half his earnings for the next 6 years. Despite his impressive victories in Rome, boxing pundits didn't expect a great career for Clay. The consensus was that he had quick footwork, but not much else. He spent too much energy, they said, dancing around the ring, and when he leant back to protect his face, he would leave his body exposed. However, Cassius relied on his long reach to strike his opponents from a distance. Cassius, well, he wanted to train under Angelo Dundee, but his sponsors sent him to California to work with a trainer by the name of Archie Moore. He made his pro debut in front of his home crowd on October 29, 1960. His opponent was Tony Hansacker. Clay won the fight with a unanimous 6-round decision. It was a great start to his pro career, but Clay wasn't happy with Archie Moore's training style, and he headed to Miami and asked Angelo Dundee to take over as his trainer. Dundee agreed, but it meant that Cassius had to live in a very rough neighborhood that was filled with gangs, drugs, and prostitution. Still, he took immediately to his new training environment, flourishing under the tutelage of Dundee. By now, it became evident that Cassius was an absolutely masterful self-promoter. In fact, his mouth, it worked faster than his fists. He never tired of announcing that he was the greatest, the prettiest, and the fastest athlete to ever step into a ring. But he was soon encouraged to talk himself up even more. In June of 1961, Clay traveled to Las Vegas for a boxing match. While in Vegas, he went to see a wrestler by the name of Gorgeous George. Cassius watched as George acted outrageously. He was trash-talking his opponent for an upcoming match. He talked endlessly before and even during the match. The whole crowd, well, that made them root for the other guy. But after the match, Cassius met George backstage. The wrestler explained that his self-promotion was designed to get as many people as possible to pay to come and see someone shut his mouth. He advised Clay to keep sassing his opponents and to always be outrageous. He also told him to find himself a gimmick that would set himself apart. Well, Clay, he soon found his gimmick. He would predict the round that he would win the match in. On November 15th, 1962, Cassius met his former trainer Archie Moore in the ring. Moore claimed that he had developed a lip-buttoner punch to finally silence the Louisville Lip, as Cassius had come to be known. In response, Clay predicted a fourth-round knockout, and that is precisely how the fight went down. Cassius, he was now a 16-win, 0-loss pro. He felt he had earned a shot at the heavyweight world champion Sonny Liston. He engaged upon a campaign of taunting Liston into taking the challenge. He began referring to the champ as a big, ugly bear, and once even traveled to his hometown of Springfield, Colorado, and banged on his door at 3 in the morning to call out the champ. Clay, he made absolutely sure that TV cameras were recording every second of this charade. Finally, Liston, well, he had had enough, and he agreed to take on the upstart. The heavyweight champ made a prediction of his own, and that would be pain. It was no idle threat. Liston was a mountain of a man who had a killer punch. He was considered by many boxing experts to be unbeatable. Cassius, he trained hard for this, the biggest fight of his life, but he didn't give it his absolute focus. Both Cassius and his brother Rudy, they were becoming increasingly interested in the Nation of Islam. They started attending meetings, and Cassius became enamored with the leader, Elijah Muhammad. He also took a great liking to the group's spokesman, Malcolm X. As the brothers started spending more time at the mosque in Miami, Malcolm told Cassius to wear his Nation of Islam membership proudly. When the title fight sponsors learned that the challenger was associating with the Nation of Islam, they threatened to cancel the event unless he disavowed the group. But Clay, he would not abandon his newfound faith. He was prepared to walk away from boxing to stay true to himself. Well, the sponsors, they ultimately backed down, and the fight, it did go ahead. Now, Liston, he was used to knocking out opponents in the early rounds, but Clay, he was too fast. His quick feet danced around the ring, and Liston was simply unable to touch him. After a grueling 6 rounds, Liston, he refused to come out for the 7th. The 22-year-old Cassius Clay was now the youngest heavyweight champ in history. As great a shock as his win was, it was superseded the very next day when he officially announced that he was a member of the Nation of Islam and that he was changing his name to Cassius X. A week later, that evolved into Muhammad Ali. The Nation of Islam, they were very unpopular with most of America. It was predicted that if he fought Liston again, there wouldn't be anyone rooting for him. Well, the two, they did meet again on May the 25th, 1965. Many in the anxious crowd, they expected to see Liston win back the title that he had lost to Ali. Instead, they were stunned to see the former champ get knocked out in the first round. On November the 22nd, 1965, Ali successfully defended his title against former champ Floyd Patterson. Patterson had spoken out against the Nation of Islam and refused to call Ali by his Muslim name. Ali made him pay for this slight, mercilessly pounding him while yelling, "What's my name?" In 1966, Ali defended his title 5 times, 4 of those defenses being held outside of the United States. On February the 6th, 1967, he fought Ernie Terrell in Houston, Texas. Terrell had enraged Ali by, just like Floyd Patterson before him, refusing to call Ali by his name. The result was what many believe to be the worst beating ever dished out in a professional boxing match. The champ tortured Terrell for the full 15 rounds, bringing him just short of a knockout and then backing off, only to wallop him again with further combinations. Ali won a unanimous points decision. Ali's next battle would pit him against the might of the United States government. On April the 28th, 1967, he turned up at the Houston Induction Center for the U.S. Armed Forces. When the time came for him to step forward, signifying his induction, Ali didn't move. He explained that his religious beliefs prevented him from joining the army and killing people with whom he had no quarrel. He further stated that he could not, in good conscience, give support to a war that he felt was morally wrong. Within 24 hours, Ali had been stripped of his heavyweight title, as well as his license to box in every state in the country. In an instant, that title he had worked so hard for was simply gone. When the US government took away his passport, he couldn't even box overseas. The government, well, they had effectively taken away his livelihood. However, the champ was never going to lie down. He became an unlikely hero to the millions of young anti-war activists around the nation. He spoke at the most prestigious universities, where he was introduced as the first national figure with the courage to stand up against the war in Vietnam. Still, the late 1960s were lean years for Ali. On August 17, 1967, he married Belinda Boyd. The next year, they had a child, Mariam. But Ali's name, it brought him opportunities, and he managed to make ends meet. He did everything from opening a restaurant called Champ Burgers to starring in the musical Big Time Buck White. As the years passed, Muhammad continued training in the hope that one day he would get the opportunity to reclaim his title. Finally, towards the end of the 1970s, some promoters in Georgia, which didn't have a boxing commission, organized a bout against Jerry Quarry. Though slower than he had been, Ali won in a convincing fashion. And now, well, other states they considered to let him fight again. If he could get another win under his belt, he might even get a shot at reigning champ Joe Frazier. To get up Frazier, Ali had to first defeat Oscar Bonavena. The fight almost went the full 15 rounds, with Bonavena taking a great deal of punishment, but he also dished out a level of abuse that Muhammad had never had to withstand before. Still, Ali won in the last round, TKO. The fight of the century, the first ever between two undefeated heavyweight champs, took place on March 8, 1971. Frazier and Ali traded blow after blow. 5 years before, Ali would have easily dodged some of Frazier's punches, but now he could only take the hits and fight through the pain and the abuse. The fight, it went the distance. It could have gone either way, but in the end, it was a unanimous decision to Frazier. Muhammad Ali, he had suffered his first professional loss. Still, he was determined to get back on top. He followed up his loss by winning 10 fights in a row. But in his 11th, he was stopped by the formidable Ken Norton, who broke Ali's jaw. But Ali, he came back in a rematch, knocking out Norton in the 6th round. And after this, well, that came the rematch that he was really after. He fought Joe Frazier, who had lost his title to George Foreman for the second time on January 28, 1974, winning in a 12-round unanimous decision. But Ali, well, he still did not have his title back. To claim it, he would have to defeat the new champ. This was the 24-year-old Foreman, who had so far won 40 fights, and his last 8 hadn't gone past the 2nd round. On paper, it looked like the 32-year-old Ali did not have a chance. The fight took place in Kinshasa, Zaire on October 30th, 1974. Over the early rounds, it appeared as if Ali was out of his depth, with Foreman apparently pounding him at will. What Ali was actually doing was allowing Foreman to punch himself to exhaustion. In the 8th round, Muhammad came to life and delivered a devastating series of blows that put Foreman on the canvas. The champ had reclaimed his heavyweight title. A year later, he faced Joe Frazier for the 3rd time, and he believed that this was the hardest fought heavyweight clash of all time. Round after round, the stunned crowd watched in awe as the battered boxers somehow fought beyond exhaustion. In the end, Ali was declared the winner in the 14th round. He was so exhausted that he couldn't even stand up to celebrate. An aging Ali defended his title 7 more times before squaring up to an unknown challenger by the name of Leon Spinks on February 15, 1978. Ali underestimated the challenger, training lightly and not taking the fight seriously enough. That night, he lost his title to a man who didn't deserve to be in the ring with him at his prime. 8 months later, despite obvious signs of developing Parkinson's disease, he avenged the loss to claim an unprecedented 3rd World Heavyweight Championship. 9 months later, he retired from the ring, but his time out of the ring would last for less than a year. On October 18, 1980, he suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of his former sparring partner, Larry Holmes. A year later, he was dispatched by a far less impressive Trevor Berbick. Time, well, it had finally caught up with Muhammad Ali. Over the next decade, his Parkinson's disease steadily got worse. The body that had served him so well was giving up on him. Still, he wasn't done yet. In the late 1980s, Muhammad Ali embarked on a new career as a humanitarian, statesman, and promoter of tolerance and peace worldwide. By the time he left us on June 3, 2016, he was recognized as one of the great men, and certainly the greatest athlete of the 20th century. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up below, and do not forget to subscribe if you haven't already for brand new videos just like this every Monday and every Thursday. Also check out some of our other videos from the past over there on the right. You'll probably enjoy these if you enjoyed those. They're all biographies, they're all of notable people like Muhammad Ali. We've got loads of others. Check those ones out on the right, and maybe watch some others if you got some time. And as always, thank you for watching.